What is up, everybody? Let me put a mute on this just to make sure we don't get all kinds of crazy feedback. And talking about crazy feedback, we are having a thunderstorm tonight in Texas. Jason and I live probably about ten miles apart or so, and
Yep.
uh, it is. He said it's headed his way. It is coming down right here like cats and dogs. My dog is actually terrified. But that's all right. We're here. We're together. I got Jace with me tonight, which I'm super excited to talk to him. We've got Chris Hope, Joe Blaylock, Michael, Architecture Drone Guy, Matt Cundiff has been in the house for a while, Harley FPV, Chris from Sunrise Water Media. Who am I missing here? JSK Enterprises, Gary Bauer. If I'm missing you, Drone Shots. Jody is there. Joe Blaylock is there. Lee just joined. He says it's not raining in San Antonio, but it's coming. Yeah, you're in for it, Lee. Anyway, thank you guys for joining. Super happy to have you all here on SpeedDial tonight. I have my good friend and someone I've really enjoyed getting to know over the last 2 years. Jace McCown is right here to my right, but he's really about 10 miles north of here. And Jace,
Yep.
welcome. You guys might know him from a few of my videos.
Yeah, I've been around. Howdy, y'all.
Except now he's got the really scraggy beard going. You know, that's it's getting. I mean, are you going to go all year and not shave? Are you going for like the ZZ Top look?
I've cut it a few times, but every time it's every time you get the scissors up there, you're like maybe just a little longer.
Yeah,
So
yeah. You know what it
I'm,
does? It's aerodynamics for when you're flying. You know, so that you can actually use it as a windsock to tell you which way the wind's blowing before you take off. If you get it long
if
enough.
if you look closely in that video we were watching earlier, you'll see it.
You see it, yeah, you see it kind of scraggling around. Well, so for those of you that don't know Jace, let me do a quick little introduction. First of all, Jace is a former Air Force pilot, but still a manned aircraft pilot, and has been working in the drone industry for quite some time since he got out of the service. He has been with a company called Skyways, and that was the company he was working for when he spoke at SpinUp 2 years ago at the Fickett Center, the Boy Scout Center. And now he's working for another company called Lyft Aircraft, which does just what they say in the name. They lift people off the ground with aircraft. So, hey, and Joe Blaylock, thanks for the super chat. I love it. I always love, I know exactly how much it's going to be. The 1, 2, 3, 4. You're the man. Thank you very much for the super chat. So, Jace, man, tell us a little bit about how you got into flying in the first place.
Well, the long story, of course, goes way back, right? And I think most people can relate to this at least on some level. But as a kid, looking up at the sky, blah blah, it's the same story, right? You're just fascinated by the idea of flying. It's just so a part of the natural human experience. And so those of us with a you know desire to do that just make their way to drones, to RC, to whatever it is. But I was wanted to be a pilot from the time I can remember, and my parents kind of helped me through this journey. Like, well, if you want to do that, how are you going to do it, right? What kind of pilot, and they kind of shaped this idea for me that I wanted to go be the coolest, the best pilot, right? I want to. I was like, who has the coolest jets? Who has the coolest stuff? The military does. I'm getting a call. I'm going to decline this. Disturb. I need that to come through. So who has the coolest equipment? Well, the military does. Oh, and they'll pay you to go to school, and they'll train you to fly, and that's a really big bill if you got to go do that on your own. And I was like, well, you've got me. So I looked into that process and saw that depending on kind of the season, the how the politics are running, where things are in the airline industry, the intake for pilots to the Air Force or any of the other services fluctuates, and it can fluctuate quite a bit. So that some years they're not really taking any new pilots, and if you just happen to like graduate, you're out of college, you're out of whatever school at that time, you may be out of luck. So in order to maximize my chances, I put my sights pretty early on to going to the Air Force Academy. My understanding was, and I think it's still this way, that about half of the pilot slots that come out every year go to the Academy. So I was like, that sounds like pretty good odds. Even if it's a really low run year, you've still got a pretty decent chance of making it to be a pilot in the Air Force if you go do that.
Do many people go to the Air Force Academy that don't want to be pilots? I mean, is that something that, or are most people there because they want to be a pilot or they want to be in aviation?
I don't. If by most we mean about more than half, then yeah, absolutely. What surprised me was the number of people who came in who didn't have that as their goal, which is great because we need more than just pilots. The Air Force is only 2% pilots, but there's this. In order to get somebody in an aircraft, it takes, as you might imagine, aircraft of these quality and expense, and it takes a lot of other efforts, culminating at the tip of the spear is the actual aircraft moving through the air, and you're just a dude sitting in there running a mission. There's this huge wave of people behind you, so. So yeah, it's really interesting. So I was very fortunate to be able to go. Getting into the Air Force Academy is its own process, and I could talk about that. I was actually let's see. There's two kind of big factors. You got to get accepted by the school, and then one of the other big ones is you have to have a nomination. And that means you have to be sponsored basically by a state senator, or there's a few other kind of off the wall nominations that you can get. The problem is each senator only has 5 nominations at any one time to each of the academies. So they have 5 students in the academy at any one time. So that means not every year there's 2 slots, right? Sometimes there's 2, most of the time there's only 1. So it's super competitive to get those nominations, actually. That ends up being kind of the neck down for a lot of folks.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting process. I'm sure people who know a little bit more about it could debate the merits of it or not.
Which senator sponsored you, by the way?
Well, that was the thing. I didn't get a nomination to the Air Force Academy. I actually did win a nomination to the Naval Academy. It was for me, and for me that was like no disparagement. I went and visited the Naval Academy. I considered going, but then I was like, I really want to join the Air Force. So I actually turned that down. Luckily, the story turns around, obviously. I had turned that down and decided basically I was going to go to UT. And this is my senior year, April of my senior year, so pretty late in the game already here. I got a letter from the vice president, Dick Cheney, at the time. And he also has 5 nominations to each of the service academies.
Wow.
So I got a pretty rare step in. Obviously, it happens every year, but not many people get it. So I was very lucky to get scooped up at the last minute by vice presidential nomination. And at that point, I was like, well, I don't think I can turn this one down.
Yeah.
It sounds like fate. I gotta go. So
that's awesome. So I didn't know that.
Yes, even just the story of getting into the academy, and then you got to survive 4 years of that, and there's a lot out there on that, and it's an ever changing environment. But great school. I'm glad I went, and I was able to get a pilot slot on graduation. So that's how I got to be a pilot in the Air Force.
And you flew. I mean, initially you trained in fixed wing, and then you eventually went to helicopters, right?
Yeah. So the way it works, at least in the Air Force, this is a recruiting video. By the way, you didn't know this, or at least information on how to get in the military.
For all you 50-year-old dudes out there that still want to join, here's how you do it.
So in the Air Force, they send you to fly fixed wing first. So this is the T6 Texan.
T-38?
It's
Oh, okay.
really small. It's a turbo prop plane, 1,000 horsepower, and this is one of the first planes you climb into. There's a few steps I'll kind of brush away. Initial flight screening before that, but pretty much right out of the gate, they throw you in this puppy, and fully aerobatic. And within a 6-month period, they drag you screaming, kicking all the way. That was me. To from their very first, I'm landing a plane basically for one of the first times ever, to doing formation aerobatics. So you're 2 feet
Wow.
off the wingtip of the guy doing loops together.
Dang.
It's an intense ride.
Like
It's incredible.
within a year of the first time you landed a plane, you were doing formation,
Yeah, and it actually,
or less than a
even
year.
less than a year. Yeah,
Wow.
so
That's
closer to 6 months.
I guess they just kind of notice and recognize that someone gets it. There's people that are just good at that sort of thing and have that sort of natural ability. Do you think that's part of the factor? Is they just kind of see
It's
that okay,
interesting. It's interesting. The Navy does it a different way. Their school's a lot more relaxed. But I think part of what they're looking for, and use a common theme. And again, I'm sure someone who knows psychology I would love to hear their thoughts on this. But it works for them. Every level of training is just stress. It's just, we're gonna stress you out, with the idea that when push comes to shove and the decision has to get made, lives are on the line, they want you to have been hardened and through a filter lots of times already.
so wait,
And
wait,
so,
wait. Then why did you start crying when you crashed my drone? That's my question.
hey, we said we wouldn't talk about that.
Sorry. All right, sorry. Continue your story. So they harden you. They make you adaptable to stress.
I guess I kind of barely made it through that process. And I could critique that, in that, hey, maybe it's not always the best way to run it like that. And the Navy has a different perspective, apparently. But in the Air Force, 6 months, they jam you through, and then they do a selection. So, like, hey, you've all been kind of trained on this aircraft. You've done everything. You've done instrument flying, formation, aerobatics, like some intense stuff. Now, what aircraft are you going to go fly? Up to this point, you've all just been in training and everything's game. But you get racked and stacked at this point against everybody in your class. And then they've got a certain number of plane slots to different aircraft. And you give them a list. Hey, number one, I want to go do this. And actually, your first kind of division isn't even necessarily what plane you're going to go to. It's what kind of plane. So are you going to go be a fighter bomber, where you're going to go fly the T-38, which I heard you mention earlier? Are you going to go fly the T-1, which is heavy aircraft, cargo transport, C-130, C-17, C-5, passenger and cargo delivery? Or are you going to go and do UAVs, which was kind of really just, I'll say really becoming a thing, but it was becoming really prevalent at the time that I was going through. And then hiding way back here in the back corner of the Air Force are a few helicopters. You could maybe go fly some of the few helicopters that the Air Force has. And I think at this point, like, I knew the Air Force had helicopters, but nobody really thinks of the helicopters in Air Force. And I was like, that's weird. Like, helicopters are weird. I don't know if I want to go fly that. But there was some interesting dynamics going on at the time. I said, like, everything is ebb and flow with the Air Force. Like, you could, 1 year you have lots of pilots, the next year you don't. Well, it's the same thing with airframes. When I was going through, they were trying to make drone pilots, and they had a backlog, I guess, of fighter pilots. So when my class went through, we started off this undergraduate pilot training with 25 folks. We left with 20 folks, and these were 20 of the 25 made it through. So that's kind of the ratios you're looking at. out of that group, nobody in my class went to go to fighters. Not a single one of us.
Wow. But
And
again,
that was kind of
that's more circumstances, right? It's more. I mean,
yeah.
it's a combination of circumstances, aptitude, etc. But it wasn't like they needed a lot of fighter pilots right then. They needed other
They weren't,
things.
yeah, they weren't trying to find them. They were really trying to fill these drone spots, and it's just kind of the roll of the dice. And that's what I wanted to go do. I wanted to go fly fighters. I put that as my number one. That's what I wanted to go do. My number two was helicopters. And I'm really fortunate that I didn't get what I wanted. Right, that happens a lot to us, but helicopters is a totally different beast. I was excited at the prospect of going to do it. And at this point, you get your selection. Hey, you're going to fly helicopters. And then in my case, I had to move. So I had lived in Del Rio, Texas for a year. And then they send you off, in my case, to Fort Rucker, Alabama, to go to an Army base to learn to fly helicopters. And the other guys got to stay there at Del Rio, but they went to new airframes. They spent another 6 months learning that, and then they got selected for their aircraft. So similar process, go to fly helicopters, get selected at the end of that training 6 months later for what aircraft you're going to go fly. Same kind of thing. I wanted to fly the CV-22, which was, they were taking pilots from both airplanes and helicopters into that. And that's the tilt rotor aircraft, right?
Yep.
So I wanted to go fly that because it's a wild thing, and they weren't taking any. So nobody got a CV-22 out of my class in helicopters. So off to fly the venerable Huey, UH-1N Huey helicopter. Really cool experience. It's all automatic. It's all manual. There's nothing automatic about that helicopter. Built in 1969.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a pretty legacy classic. You know, it's tried and true,
Yeah.
but then not as much modern equipment on it.
No. I think that there were a few digital displays in there. One was our fuel gauge, and the other one was our radio units. And then we had like a GPS from the 1990s. And everything else was steam gauges, old school, dials and gauges.
Yeah, the kind of stuff you tap on when it's not working. Okay. Yeah, it was just
exactly. Exactly.
Like literally.
That is exactly it. And man, it was a blast though. It's because it's all you all the time. So it's really fun. It's also exhausting to fly because it's all you all the time. And on a helicopter, like, you can't take your feet off the pedals.
No, you can't just coast, right? There isn't
No.
an autopilot. There's no autopilot on those, right? Especially the Huey.
No.
No,
no.
it's all you all the time, like you said.
A helicopter is inherently unstable too, so it's not like you could potentially set your trims and kind of let it float for a little bit to look in the back seat or something like that on a Cessna. But like on this, like, you let go and it's gonna try and roll over or spin. It's gonna do something to try and kill you.
Yeah.
So,
it's a little bit like a FPV quad when you're first starting out. You know what I mean?
Not that unlike it. Yeah. Exactly. So.
Well, so you were in the Air Force. You flew the Hueys. Got out of the Air Force, and then how did you transition from doing helicopters into drones, like working for a couple different drone companies?
Yeah. So at the time that I was getting out, you've only got so much life to live. You've only got so many things you can do with it. What am I going to do with this next chapter? I had the option to stay in, I got to a point where my commitment was done with the Air Force. When you go through pilot training, you sign on the dotted line that says,
"Hey, they invest a lot of money and time in you, so they expect to get it back," and you fulfilled that commitment.
Yeah. So when that commitment is done, you get the option to stay or go. And I said, this was cool. It's super amazing to be able to do this. I'm going to try something else. I'm going to go experience something else. What can I leverage my skills into? My degree is in computer engineering. I love, tech. My call sign's Digit. Part of that's kind of my computer background. The other part I'll have to tell you over a beer. And and then so like what can I do? Computers and flying and drone stuff. This was 2017. So but I had an interesting perspective on drones, like in the Air Force, and like I had seen them as a certain way, but drones were now starting to become, more mainstream for photography and these other use cases. I've been kind of introduced to some of the industrial use cases in agriculture. I'm like excited about gardening and like nature and making, better use of the world's resources. And so I was like, man, we could use drones in agriculture to like solve some of these issues. And of course, other really smart people had already figured all this out. And so I was like getting really psyched about what drones could do. And I was like, I think this is it. I've got the aviation, I've got the kind of the engineering, I've got the piloting stuff. Let's go. I don't even know where to begin. I had no idea how to break into this. So started looking all over the country and was back in town for Christmas here in Austin when I ran into a job posting here in Austin. And this is my hometown too, right? So I was like, wow, this is crazy. Turns out it's just the front edge of a big wave for Austin, drone stuff. So I'm super glad we got to be pulled back here, families here. But at the time, I had bought a little Sima drone, and like I had flown that in my backyard a few times, but that was the extent. I didn't grow up flying RC or anything like that, so I barely knew anything about drones, and I got hired to be a test pilot for this drone company. And there was a lot of learning that had to occur to bring me up to speed. But yeah, over the course of 2 years, I learned a lot about, drones, RC, flight planning, flight controls, all the things that go into making a custom design from the ground up airplane, drone configuration fly.
And
really
that was Skyways. Am I right about that's who that was?
Yes, yeah, and they're still here in town, and they're doing good stuff.
And I was just going to say, for everyone who came to SpinUp in 2019 when we had it at the Boy Scout Center, Jace was a speaker, and one of the things he showed, kind of this journey at Skyways where they landed an autonomous drone where he took his hands off the controller. Well, actually, was holding it, but not touching the sticks, not pinching, not thumbing, not using his nose, none of the above. And this thing landed not only autonomously, but on a moving ship in the water, which was, that was friggin' amazing. I remember when you gave that presentation at the end when it landed, everybody in the room just went crazy, clapping and stuff. And, we were just, cool. Yeah, and I can only imagine what it was like to be there when that happened. But that part of it was really cool, very interesting. But now the company that you're at currently, tell us about Lyft.
Yeah, so Lyft has been around for about 3 years, and I remember seeing them in the early days and being like, wow, they've got some cool stuff going on. But we are building a personal, recreational, man-carrying, ultralight drone.
Man, woman, or they?
Say again?
I said man, woman, or they. Gender non-specific person carrying.
Yes, absolutely.
How does your drone identify? Do you call it a she or?
Yeah. Okay. I think that's pretty traditional. Yeah. I think I don't think anybody else knows this, but I call her Helga. So
that's a great name. Very, very German sounding. Yeah, Helga. No.
Well, the aircraft is called the Hexa. That's the model that we're the model name. So Hexa, Helga. I don't know. So
yeah.
Not officially named Helga.
it's actually built. And you have
a few of them. Not just it. There's a few of them. Yeah.
And the idea, you guys are looking at all different ways of using it, but at some point you may actually even give people the opportunity to pay to fly it, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And the idea, you guys are looking at all different ways of using it, but at some point you may actually even give people the opportunity to pay to fly it, right?
Yeah, actually, that was the main driver for the company, was using this particular cutout in the rules for ultralight flight, which requires no pilot's license and no certification of the aircraft, as long as you meet certain requirements, including obvious a weight limit, hence the ultralight. As long as you meet these things, then you don't have to have a lot of oversight from the FAA. There's some restrictions to that, which includes that the pilot flying the aircraft can't be doing commercial work. So we can't deliver packages with this yet, and you can't use it to fly from one place to another for hire. So as long as you're up there having fun,
so it's like a sport
to
aircraft, kind of like that.
Yeah.
Isn't there a category of aircraft, light sport?
Yes, yeah, and there's light sport does require a license, and it's kind of like ultralight one upped. So
Okay.
it requires a license, but it's not nearly as intensive as a PPL, a private license. And there's still restrictions on what you can do with the aircraft, how much it can weigh, and other things like that. The ultralight is even more, tighter reins on what the aircraft can be and what it can do in some ways, but then you don't have to have a license at all. So very cool. So the whole company's model is that, I mean, pretty much anyone, if you hand them a DJI controller, right, they can fly it around.
Yeah.
Because it's stabilized by the computer. It has geofences and all this technology that makes it so that it flies itself, and you're really just asking it to go do things, and it determines if
it's
that's safe
literally
or
the
not.
opposite of it's the opposite of a Huey.
It is the exact opposite of a Huey. Yes. So the taking that same technology and applying it to manned aircraft is a no-brainer, and that's what allows us to we're going to take folks with about an hour of training, including some simulator time, and then be able to actually throw them up in an aircraft. They're the pilot, and they can operate it with some autonomous assists. And that will be safe and fun, and it'll be the first of its kind.
So I'd love to know from the audience, from everybody watching right now in the chat, and I don't know, Jace, if you have the chat open, but I should text you the link to it so you can see. But
I think here on my phone, I'm seeing it on the side. Let me see. It wasn't auto scrolling for me though. So
Ken Herron has a segment on his Thursday Night Live called "Would You Fly It" or something like that, and he basically shows these person carrying UAVs, and well, I guess it's not UAV at that point. It's a MAV, a PAV. Anyway, he asked the question,
it's
"Would you
illegal.
fly it?" And so I want to know from everyone out here, and unfortunately I don't have any videos to roll. You can go to I think it's liftaircraft.com. Is that right? That's the
Yep.
website. So it's carbon fiber. Would you ride it? I think that's what maybe it's called. So who would if Jace were to offer everyone watching tonight a free ride in this thing, if I'm just saying if who would take him up on it? Who would go up in this thing? Because I'm going to be first in line. I can tell you that. I've already been giving him a lot of grief about when they do this thing, he needs someone to review the experience, and that's this guy right here. But who in the audience says they would go on the thing? But while people are answering that question, tell us about it so that people know what they're getting into.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, if you know drones, then you know this aircraft in a lot of ways already. The especially FPV drones, which I know Kelly, you've been digging into more and more. But I mean, yeah, the you mentioned it briefly. The frame's all carbon fiber, titanium, 3D printed titanium, milled aluminum, aircraft grade stuff. All the structures are actually made by tier 1 aircraft supplier. Triple redundant flight controller. So instead of Beta Flight, we're running something that's a little bit souped up, and there's 3 processors that are running the same thing. So if one of them decides to brick, we've got 2 more in backup. Lots of redundant sensors, because obviously we've got someone on board. We don't want this thing to lock up like you might see with a regular drone sometimes.
Right, sure. Of course not.
A little higher. It has a parachute on top, so that and it's good to anything less than about 15 meters, so like 30, 45 feet or so. It's got a parachute on board. It's an aircraft, but also a drone. It's a really interesting combination. And
how many motors? Did you say how many motors?
18.
Yeah. And isn't there some redundancy there? Like if a motor went down?
More than a little bit of redundancy. And we've sometimes had these tests induced by the nature of reality, and we've actually purposefully done this a number of times too, where we shut off motors in flight. And if you lose one motor on this thing, you wouldn't even notice. In fact, we've literally had it happen to us and not even notice, because the prop was still spinning in its own wash.
Right.
And we didn't even notice till we landed. So it's incredibly redundant. If you think about the number of moving parts that are on a helicopter, I don't even have a rough guess for how many moving parts there are. But you've seen a drone before. The only moving parts are the motor, the bell, and the prop of the motor together. So there's really only 18 moving parts on this, and they're all completely independent. Each motor is fed by its own battery, which goes through its own speed controller, its own ESC, so that if you lose an ESC, you lose a battery, you lose a motor, the rest of the system is unaffected. The math says that if you lose the right 6 motors, you could still stay flying. If you lose 6 to each other, you're probably not gonna be up. It's time to test the parachute.
You don't mean the right as in the starboard 6. You mean as in the correct 6, right? If you lost the right 6, you're screwed.
No. Well, you're not screwed. You've got the parachute, right? So I mean, the amount of safety and redundancy that is built into this has been thought through over and over again. I'm really proud to be a part of the team.
That's awesome.
That's working with this. So.
Well, across the board, everybody's got the yes, I would ride. I think there were 1 or 2. Jackie Gann said no, probably not. But there were for the most part, yeah, it's all yeses. One question too, because I know that at least one guy in here is a big fella. Well, you met him, Kai. You met Kai at the meetup down in New Braunfels. How tall or how much can you weigh in that thing?
The height is a really good question. I'll have to go measure it when I'm at work on Tuesday. But the weight, right now we're limited to 250 pounds.
Okay.
And there's a few things that go into that function, including the weight that the parachute and the frame can handle, but also starting to come against what we can do with the propulsion under the ultralight category. So one of the things that's carved out in ultralight is they allow you to carry up to 5 gallons of fuel. But for us, since we're electric, our batteries don't actually count against that. So the battery weight is one of the most substantial things on the aircraft, and we don't get an allowance for that. So we could fly with heavier weights, but we'd have to have more powerful batteries, and it at about that number, they start to run away from each other. So
and literally, I've seen the batteries you're using. They're giant versions of this, right? Aren't they Tattoo?
Yeah, they are. They're currently Tattoo. We're open to a multitude of suppliers. However, they are lithium polymer batteries. They're 16S. So a little bit.
This is a 4S. This is 4S.
Okay, that's a 4S. How many milliamp hours is that? Is that 850?
650.
Okay, so ours are 9 amp hours.
9 amp hours. Milliamp hours.
Yeah, 9,000 milliamp hours at 16S, which it's a little more. Oh, and there's 18 of them, not just one. So There's a lot of power up there.
How much do those weigh each? Do you know? Several pounds each, right?
It's about the packaging and everything. It's about 8 pounds
Per battery.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And then when you charge them, like most consumer battery chargers, the ones I've got sitting over here go up to 6S. How do you charge a 16S?
You have some specialized equipment, basically, but it's not that. It's everything that we have that's drone stuff is souped up. It's just really big stuff. The motors that we currently have on board, do you remember what kind they are?
No, I remember what they look like, but I don't remember.
They're T-motor, and we use T-motor props too.
Okay,
carbon fiber.
Carbon fiber. Yeah, I was going to say they're not plastic props. They're carbon fiber.
No, but they're made by T-motor. It's they've got a lot of commercial products, so it's not quite the same stuff. But it really is in so many ways just an extension of the stuff that you'd be used to from building a drone at FPV.
And here's
on a totally different scale.
Here's the thing that'll blow everybody's mind is that at least I think this is right, unless I'm thinking back at Skyways, but I believe for that aircraft you're just using an FR Sky Taranis radio to fly it, right?
So when we fly it from the ground, I am using an FR Sky Horus 10 with TBS Crossfire.
And so literally an FPV drone remote control.
Yeah. Yep.
Just standard remote. And is it similar where like is there one arm switch to arm all the props, to arm all 16 motors?
We actually kind of take the DJI approach there, and it's staged. So, I mean, this flies more like a DJI with a lot of assistance and things like that. So we actually do a stick arm. So we arm it with a stick combination, and then it does a bunch of self checks and make sure that everything's okay before it spins the props. It does a bunch of self checks after it spins the props, and then you have to initiate a takeoff after that, and it's constantly evaluating itself for any kind of hiccups. And like I said, there's 3 computers on board that are all capable of flying at the same time, so it's souped up.
so a few comments in the comments. Somebody's saying bring on the graphene batteries. Which I've heard a little bit about graphene batteries, but that could be the future of it, right? I mean, those things are supposed to be way more efficient, I believe.
Hey, we're up for anything. I know that at our end, we haven't found a good reason to move off of what we've got right now. But
yeah, especially when it's easily available or moderately easily available. You know, it isn't something. Stuff that you have to have custom built every single time, especially like the tattoo batteries. And then Joe Blaylock calculated 144 pounds worth of batteries. And then Ben wanted to know what the flight time. And then actually, 2 questions. Ben wanted to know what's the flight time, and then Chris wanted to know what happens if you lose control link. Like if you turn the radio off, does it go into an auto land sequence or what?
Yeah. So. All of those have been considered. The sorry, what was the first question? Oh, flight time.
Flight time, yeah.
It depends on the payload. So if Kai was to sit in it, it'd be a lot lower than if I get to sit in it. You may not be able to tell thanks to the magic of videos and YouTube, but I'm not a giant guy. It's like the jockey to get the most flight time out of it right now.
Yeah. That beard adds a few pounds.
It does, especially all the stuff that's in there. No, yeah, but unmanned with nobody on board, you can get up to about 15 minutes. Okay. And then we've done manned flights that are in the 10-minute range. So
what happens if the controller, you forgot to charge your battery in your remote control last night? Uh-oh.
Well, then someone's in trouble, because when you're flying like this, you've got checklists and procedures. It's a professional aviation, so I'll throw that out there. You don't run out of batteries. But we also do have contingencies because people make mistakes and technology fails. So yeah, depending on the mode that the aircraft is in, what it's doing, where it's at, the response can be different. It could either be a return to home or a land immediately. So there's a lot of different contingencies, but each one of those steps, there's a flow chart behind it as to what the aircraft's going to do depending on the situation. So
two more things. Somebody asked about a question, or sorry, a question about a picture. If you want to see a picture of it, you can go to liftaircraft.com, and there's pictures and videos on liftaircraft.com, right, Jace?
yep, yeah,
And
absolutely.
then
And Lyft Aircraft posts. I think we've got a Facebook, an Instagram, LinkedIn, and all those things too. And so you can find us on there and keep up with what we're doing.
And then Harley FPV said, "What keeps you out of the props?" Now Harley's got these long dreadlocks, and I can imagine like the wind would suck those up into the props and just spin them all around. So that would be a mess. I think you're in a canopy. You're in a bit of a
Yeah.
canopy, so that you don't, you're not completely enclosed, but you're somewhat enclosed. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So our configuration actually resembles a helicopter in that the lift platform, the crown with those 18 motors, is in kind of a circular shape over your head, well over your head. In my case, because I can't even touch the motors when I'm reaching up. And in fact, some of our tallest folks can't really reach the props. And that was kind of the goal. Although, kind of by the nature of a drone, you can stop the props when you want. So unlike on a helicopter where you've got to climb in, you've got to start the engine, you got to spin the props, so if you land, you keep the props spinning a lot of times. In this, when you land, you just disarm it, you turn the props off, you climb back in, you climb out, you get it back in, and you turn it back on and go. So the idea of getting in the way of the props it's not really relevant in this case. Some kind of these passenger drones, the eVTOL, which is this kind of this name that gets thrown around a lot for this type of aircraft. They have props down kind of by your knees.
Yeah.
That makes me a little bit uncomfortable. But with the right automations and things, those kind of things can be safe too. So.
And eVTOL, electric vertical takeoff and landing. Is that right?
Yeah.
So this also has pushers and pullers. So it's got some that are pushing and some that are pulling. Or am I?
They're all pushing. All of ours are pushing, but they are so it's like a quadcopter in a lot of ways. They're all pushing, but they're all counter rotating, right?
Okay. And just like on a quadcopter, you have it balanced between like the two on this side rotate opposite directions to keep it
alternate around the structure so that if you lose one and you're not heavily weighted to one side or the other. It's really balanced.
Yeah, cool. No, it's pretty cool. And like I said, if you want to see pictures and video of it, you can just go to liftaircraft.com and check it out. Now, I did go on the website earlier, and I thought I saw something where there might be opportunities to kind of pre-sign for flights. Is that going on, or is that I thought I saw that on the website.
Yeah, so we had mentioned early on kind of the initial push for the reason the company was started was to provide this recreational experience. And so kind of the way of doing things on the internet and pre-buying tickets, we had the opportunity to pre-buy a spot to come fly the aircraft when we start our tour. We're based in Austin, so if you're in Austin, the first flights are going to be here. And we're working on. I wish I could tell you some of the cool stuff about where we're going to be.
Well, I'm sure it's Canyon Vista Middle School, right? That's where we're going to fly at. And I just want to tell everybody here is a bit of trivia for everyone about Jace. Jace was a student at Canyon Vista Middle School, the place where I'd say at least 50% of my videos have been flown or shot. Jace was a student there. So when we go fly there, he's like, "Hey, what's up, Mr. B? Hey, And Mr. B's like, "I told you you'd never amount to nothing, hanging out with that Shores kid." So he has had to jump the same fence that Chris from Sunrise Water Media and Greg Harley FPV and so many guys who have come out. Ben came out and flew with us. That damn coach keeps that field locked, and so if you crash, you have to jump the fence to go get your drone. It's the walk of shame. I flew there last night and I crashed twice because about a week ago when I was with Harley FPV and Chris and Ben, we were all flying. I crashed into the Red Devils. Now the Red Devils, you know what they are? They're those metal things, and I had to actually
I know what
replace.
they are.
Yes,
Yes.
had to replace the camera and the air unit in my little quad, and that wasn't too bad to
Oh
do. But
no.
then I was like, okay, I got to go back and get those Red Devils. So I did. I got through them a bunch of times, but I crashed doing other stuff. I got a little cocky and was trying to do like instead of just flipping once, I was flipping like 5 times, and literally, well, I mean, you can do it. It's not that hard. You just kind of drop the throttle and hold it whatever direction you want to flip. But you get dizzy and disoriented when you try to do that. And when I see guys doing that now, I'm like, how do you flip that many times and then end up back in horizontal?
Pop it right
Because
back. Yeah.
because I would stop and I'd be all right. Now, which way am I facing as I'm falling towards the earth? So anyway, student at Canyon Vista Middle School. So that's a good transition into your kind of recreational RC airplane flying and drone flying and stuff. You said you didn't really grow up flying RC like a lot of the guys in the chat here did. What was your kind of you said you had a SEMA when you started out. You've flown some
Yeah.
DJI drones. What's your take on all that on the recreational hobby?
Well, I think the best way to put it is I'm a huge fan. I love it. It actually informs what I do, like flying this big aircraft, and it helped me to learn what I was doing early on with Skyways when I was just getting into things. You go out and you look at videos about what is an ESC and what does it do, and what are these issues I'm finding, and a lot of the information that's out there is based off of recreational flying, drones or airplanes and things like that. And so you can't help but like run against that if this is what you're doing. And of course, just that the experience of getting up there and well, I say the experience like you're getting up there and doing it, but not putting yourself at risk, and the equipment costs are low. It's a really amazing thing, and I'm a big fan of it. I wish I got to spend more time doing it. But that's why I love coming hanging out with you, because you've got all the cool toys.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely, and certainly, one of the most fun times I've had was going down to New Braunfels with you and Travis, and getting to fly with Kai and Chris and all those guys. It's just there's a camaraderie to it. It's really fun to hear
Absolutely.
other people's take on, especially when they've got the goggles on and they're narrating and kind of talking about what they're doing or what just went wrong or how they crashed into another drone in the sky. Kai, I'm looking at you, you big bully. I mean, there's so many things that just make it a fun thing to do, and then the even the fun part of kind of how can I fix this? Can I repair this? Can it be fixed or
Hey,
could it be improved?
Wyatt, my shirt here is like a real tribute to
Yeah.
like what I do on a daily basis, but like seriously for all you folks, this is one of my favorite shirts. Fly it, crash it, fix it, repeat.
Yeah, yeah.
So
No, that's and it gets to be one of those things where I think that you go into it for the aviation experience and then you kind of stick with it for the friendships, and the common thing that people can all get super excited about it. I feel like we're a bunch of guys who are still kind of little boys at heart. Everybody's still got this kind of, like you said, when you started, you wanted to be a pilot from a very early age and you had that excitement. Now, I just a little bit of a side tangent here. I just finished watching a Masterclass. So last year when the pandemic started, um, we were watching a lot of TV, and I said to my kids, "All right, let's try to learn something when we're watching. Let's just try to watch something that it's at least going to teach us something." So we subscribed to Masterclass. It's like I don't know, 15
oh,
bucks a month or something. and it's really excellent. They've expanded a lot. I mean, they have chess, they have cooking, they have writing, they have filmmaking, they have just all these things. But they have Chris Hadfield. Do you know who Chris Hadfield is?
I feel like I know the name, but not
So
super familiar.
he is a Canadian, and he was on the International Space Station for like 6 months or some crazy amount of time. He commanded three or four shuttle missions, and he has done like more spacewalks than just about anybody else. And the cool thing was, Chris Hadfield was talking, and then he's showing pictures and he's talking about other astronauts on the missions. And one of them was Scott Parazynski, who Scott
Okay,
Parazynski
yeah.
was another speaker at SpinUp. So Chris Hadfield and Scott Parazynski went into space together several times. That was really cool to say, hey, I've met that guy. But
Yeah.
his masterclass was amazing. It was all about space flight, and he talked about like the whole propulsion system of a rocket and the difference between solid and liquid fuels and the trade-offs between them. Talked about how to get to Mars. Talked about a thing called the Hohmann method and
Transfer.
the Hohmann transfer. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Oh man, flexing there. And that. Can you tell us what the Hohmann transfer is?
No, you took the class. I'm gonna the teacher, and why
Uh,
don't you? I don't.
the
I
the
can't
home
remember.
the Hohmann transfer is the most efficient way to move from one orbit to another around a body.
Okay.
So
Okay. Yeah.
it uses gravity to get you to the next level. And he talks about how in orbit around the Earth mostly, but around any planet, but particularly when they're orbiting the Earth, in order to climb, you actually slow down. And
Hmm.
and and if you want to catch up with another object that's above you, you have to slow down, and that makes you go higher. It's like all he said. It's just like this big, mind. You know what? I mean, just
Yeah.
totally mind blowing. Anyway, Chris Hadfield, I loved watching that class and hearing about Scott Parazynski. I don't even know how I got on this tangent. Oh, I do know how. He talked about growing up in Canada and how his big thing was from the time he was like 9 years old when the first guys were going into space. When he was born, nobody had been in space yet, and I think like the first astronauts in the early '60s went up and orbited. The Russians did that, and then of course Alan Shepard, etc. And how he just knew he wanted to be an astronaut. And just like you were talking about with the Air Force Academy, he talked about how the astronauts are such a small percentage of the folks that are in NASA and the Canadian Space Agency and the other
Yeah.
space agencies. How it's just there's this entire. As a matter of fact, one of the guests I've had on this show a couple times, Audi Overbeek, he was a guy who worked on the spacesuits for NASA, like
Oh,
actually
yeah.
helped build those things. But sorry, a bit of a tangent there. But if you do watch Masterclass and you're into it, you're into space, I would highly recommend the Chris Hadfield one. It was great.
I feel like you need to get a sponsorship from them now for this. I mean, that would because I'm super intrigued. I love space stuff. I've been like digging into my art of flight test and engineering and stuff, and so I've done a lot of listening recently to some of the early space stuff. Obviously, X-15 rocket plane was a book I just read, and it talks about kind of this early age, the pre space shuttle,
Yeah, like in
from
the
the
40s and
side.
50s, like the early jets, right? I mean, they were
Yeah,
going kind of into space, but just kind of skimming on the atmosphere.
yeah,
Wow.
exactly. And so that was so I've been following kind of the same things and picking out lessons of for flight tests and things like that. So I've been digging into this stuff too. So that's cool.
I also wanted to show you something else that I have here. Hold on. This was sent to me by uh, this gentleman named Christian Malika. You see what that says? The
Okay.
FPV Flight Dynamics. It is a thick book. It
That
arrived.
that is not inconsequential. Yeah.
No, no, no. I mean, you hear that? I mean that is a thick book. You can hear the echo in there. But I intend. I told Christian if he sent me this book, I would read it over the summer. So that this is going to be my light summer reading about FPV flight dynamics. I mean, it's just so mind blowing, especially when you start doing those multiple flips. You know, you go in and you just do this crazy roll, or you're doing yawing at the same time. How the hell does it turn this way with four propellers? You know, that doesn't even make sense to me, and I'm hoping this book will explain it. So.
It looks like it'd be awesome. I don't doubt there's some things that I could learn in there. But it has been really cool. Like coming back to like a little bit of the Air Force background and the helicopter background. While there's very many things that are unique to the way that drones fly, that the way that they do the flight control, the way the motors and the ESCs and these electric components interact with the that kind of stuff that is so different from the Huey helicopter over there. There's a lot of the basic aerodynamics and that stuff that they were figuring out, in the first half of the last century, right? That stuff hasn't changed. It's pretty basic physics. And so the dynamics of how the propellers work and how the bodies react to forward flight and spinning bodies like propellers and things like that. All of that knowledge kind of carried over for me. And for the guys who've been pure drone, may not have some of that experience. And then I got to learn from some of the guys who had never, touched a real helicopter before, and all the new things that a drone is capable of with its, technology.
Well, like you said, a drone mechanically is actually way, way simpler than a helicopter, right? Pretty much everything is way, way simpler than a helicopter as far as the mechanical pieces of it go. Less things to break, less kind of, I mean, and a bit more redundancy, especially if you
Mm-hmm.
have a hexacopter
Yeah.
or something with more than four motors. I mean, I think with four motors, pretty much all four are essential. But you know, um,
All,
it, it's it's it is really cool though that you had that experience again on one of the most primitive aircraft that's still flying today. Well, aside from antiques, it literally was built in the '60s, right? And so,
oh yeah, yeah.
um, do they make new Hueys, or these are actually the ones that were flown in the '60s? Like, was the what year was the ones you flew? What were they? Were there
Yeah, I
new
mean,
ones?
I flew birds that were in Vietnam. So so yeah. So I've flown birds that had covered up bullet holes on them. No joke.
Wow, that's
From Vietnam. So yeah. No, and I mean, and in a lot of ways, even if the frame was built in the '60s, right? They were designed in the '50s, right? Because that's how big aircraft work, So by the
yeah,
time it hits
yeah.
the line, it was designed 10 years before that. So
So slide rulers and abacus and chisel
and
and all that stuff.
that is impressive stuff. Just imagining like the complexity of feeding air into a jet engine and getting it to combust at the right fuel mixture and not having a computer to be able to do the math. And so all of that mixing of fuel and the changing of that to meet a power requirement that the pilot is asking for is all done mechanically. Valves and levers that rotate cams and put just the right amount of fuel in to meet the growing power demand and not choke the engine. Oh, it's cool. But when you get to a drone, you've replaced that physical mechanical complexity with software complexity in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
And so it kind of depends on the person you are and whether you want to take that. There's only so much, right? Because we've got atoms, right? And you can only tune our manufacturing capability. You can only get things put together in our physical space so fine. But with software, you can take the edge off of a lot of things. And so, where are you going to tolerate that the redundancy and those backup systems? But when it's zeros and ones in a computer, and it just takes one bit maybe to be in the wrong place, and
yeah, yeah.
now critical function doesn't work. And so there's the complexity that you get rid of on the mechanical side is totally in so many ways taken up by a deep level of complexity on the software side.
Yeah,
So
you also wonder too if people you wonder can you hang on for 10 more minutes?
hey, I'm here.
All right. Well,
My
let's
kids
do
aren't
this.
screaming that I can hear yet.
No, I haven't heard him. Let's open up the call line and see if anybody wants to call in and ask Jace a question or something and see what's up. So the fan line is 256-540-8245. All you got to do is dial old school. You know, you get out that big rotor, dial us up, and then you can ask Jace questions. What do you got there?
So while we're waiting for that, here was an incident I had on a test aircraft at one point. These were counter rotating, a stack of counter rotating propellers, and in a contact with the ground, the props bent and then merged, and
Wow.
they got kind of permanently stuck. So
Yeah,
that's carbon fiber, a little dusty from being on my wall,
that's pretty
but that's
cool
one of
though.
those. It's one of those little fun pieces I like to keep around.
You know, it's almost like two people in medieval times with magical swords, and they clash them, and
It kind of looks like that. Oh,
yeah.
we didn't get the. We didn't. I hinted at that, but we
Oh
didn't
yeah,
get
yeah,
the.
yeah. Well, nobody's calling, so I'll close the fan line. So yeah, let's talk about that controller. Is that new? Did you just get that recently?
Yeah, like a month and a half or so ago.
Okay.
So I mean, it's the jumper T light, right? So
I love that
it's
form factor. I love how small they are compared to a traditional. You can throw it into a bag. They generally have a great battery life. The range, and that's kind of what DJI's gone with, for their new for their FPV stuff. I mean, this is
Mhm.
way different than the original FPV DJI. So, it's cool that and for that literally, especially if the antennas fold down the right way, throwing it in a backpack is so much more like you're confident that it's not going to get destroyed. Whereas if you throw a traditional one in, you're going to bend the gimbals or break the antennas or whatever. Is that your case for it?
Yeah, so like I've now this is my case for like the one drone that I have, which is I don't even want to show you what it is because it's a brushed whoop. Like the only functioning is a brushed whoop, but I can't kill that thing. It's just a
Yeah,
little one brushed whoop. I can't kill it. And then all that just fits in here, and I love this little guy. So I
yeah,
used to
yeah.
have a Tyrannus QX7 or whatever, but this guy is so great. It talks to all the drones, and the form factor, like you're saying. I had wanted a gamepad style one for a long time. I grew up on Xbox,
Yeah.
so I wanted the game style pad one, and I was super happy when this came out. I'm waiting to see where they go from here. So
Well, and of course, the next thing's going to be just like retina, so you can fly it with your eyes or something like that. But well, we have no takers on the call, so boo. Actually, I think someone last week, I forget who it was, just called me because they felt bad for me. They're like, okay, I'll make a pity call. But I'm gonna close the fan line and let Jace
all
get
right,
to. Jace has an entire brood. He's kind of like Jeff Sills. He has a lot of kids, and his job his one job is to put those kids to bed. And I'm interrupting it tonight. So, uh,
it,
although
it's
school's
not one
out,
of
right?
mine. It's not my one job, but it's one of the ones that I don't like to miss.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
a great time. So
No, I really appreciate you tonight. If you haven't gone over and checked out Lyft Aircraft, their first of all their website, second of all of their social media. If you want to see what's going on there, I do think I saw, like you said, they're offering some discounted flights for people who take it early. So I am going to go sign up so that when the time comes, I'm first on the list. In hopes that I will have the ability to add a video component to it, um, which I'm sure we can work out. But
I'm
Jace,
sure we can work something out.
uh, I'm pretty confident that when I finally get when I finally get the announcement and have a location for SpinUp 2021, you're going to be there. Is that a fair assessment, you think?
Yeah, yeah, and of course I'm
Yeah,
traveling a lot, so I hope I'm around. But yeah, hey, if I'm in town, yeah, it's a done deal.
right on, right on. Well, thank you again for joining us. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We had a really great crew in the house tonight, and you guys, you make it worthwhile to do this. And it looks like the storm has passed, and looks like my
Woohoo!
family's home, so the timing is perfect. Jace,
Awesome.
thanks again, man. I look forward to flying with you
Absolutely.
again soon, and everyone else, fly safe. We'll talk to you soon. And here comes the awkward ending where I push the